accept that. There we go. Got it. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for part 2 of our meat processing facility webinar series. My name is Mandy Archer. I'm director for the Blue Ridge Crossroads Small Business Development Center, serving parts of Southwest Virginia. This series is a partnership between all of our Southwest SBDCs that include Virginia Highlands Community College, Mountain Empire Community College, Southwest Community College, and then of course our center as well. And of course, during pandemic, post-pandemic, supply chain has been a huge issue across all industries, specifically or definitely in the meat or access to fresh meat for families. And so all of our centers have seen what we consider an uptick in the interest level of individuals or organizations trying to start up a processing facility or expand something they have. And so with that, we wanted to join together and come up with a series that would inform individuals or organizations on the ins and outs. This is meant as an overview, not necessarily your full business plan. But in order to do that, we enrolled the assistance of Penny LaCraft from Chappelle Business Strategies, who will share some information about herself, but she's been doing work with our centers on an individual basis and in many different areas because she loves to learn. And so she's able to learn lots of different things. So just a moment after a few other comments, I'll turn it over to Penny. But in the meantime, we will take questions at the end of the presentation. But if you have something during that you either want clarification or you just want to type it so you don't forget, please feel free to put that in the chat box. And then also, again, we do take attendance. And so if your full name is not shown on your Zoom screen, please try to just type it in that chat box real quick so I can make sure that we have captured your attendance here. And lastly, we do record these, as Penny said, and we do share that information after the presentations. And at the end, this is a 3-part series. So if you've missed any of them for any reason, you are going to receive all 3 recordings, presentations, etc. After we finish up next week on the last one on the 27th. If I haven't missed anything, Penny, you please add it. But as for the time being, let me turn it over to you. And I appreciate all the work you've put in.
Thank you. Thank you, Mandy. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Here, let's pick the right one. And Mandy and I will both be watching for questions, and hopefully we can catch those as you put them in the chat box. If not, we'll definitely make sure we have time at the end. As Mandy mentioned, some of you were on last week where we kind of gave just a general overview of what's all involved in starting a meat processing facility. And today's session, we're going to be zeroing in a little bit on regulations. It's still pretty high level, but just kind of more or less giving you some direction as where to go and what things to look for as far as regulations go. So today we're going to be covering some of these topics. Going to do quick introductions and some highlights of what you need to know, some things to consider regarding regulations, USDA, Food Service Inspection Services, how they're involved, and what you need to know about how to qualify for inspection. And we're going to put a lot of contact information on here in the end also. This is being presented today and brought to you by the Southwest region of the SBDCs of Virginia. So appreciate Mandy and Cindy reaching out to me and asking me to present this information to you. It has been extremely enlightening to me. And I hope we'll be able to give you some information and help put some structure around what you need to know in order to pursue and consider pursuing such an endeavor. Today we have with us Peyton Lee from the VDACS office, the Office of Meat and Poultry Inspection. She's the Technical Resource Advisor. Really appreciate her input on this information, and she will be available to answer questions as well. So thank you, Peyton, for joining us. And I'm sure we'll be leaning on you heavily through this discussion. As Mandy mentioned, I'm Penny Luckcraft, the founder of Chappelle Business Strategies. I am a passionate entrepreneur. I've started many of my own businesses, and I've experienced helping others and other organizations with startups. And I'm an insatiable learner. So when the opportunity came up to dive into this topic, it was something completely new for me, but it has been a lot of fun and just very fascinating. But it's what I love to do is to learn about businesses and help other businesses become successful. So let's dive right in. Some of the things that you need to know around regulations. Of course, the USDA, specifically the Food Safety Inspection Service Division, that arm of the USDA is who is responsible for ensuring that our food supply is safe. So they are the ones who make the regulations, monitor them, and oversee everything regarding the regulatory needs of meat processing, meat packing, meat sales, all of that, all-inclusive bucket. There is, of course, a couple of basic types of facilities. There's those that are USDA inspected, and here in the state of Virginia, VDAX does do inspections on behalf of the USDA. But some of you may not be thinking about having an inspected facility. You may be more interested in just servicing the farmers and their needs for their personal use, the custom exempt avenue of a meat processing facility. So what are the different needs, and what do you need to know for all of these different types of services? The USDA Food Safety Inspection Service website is, of course, the ultimate authority. But there is so much out there. It can be absolutely overwhelming. When I went out there, started there thinking, okay, I'll get everything I need right here, I was just like, whoa, pages and pages and pages of information. So, of course, it's good to make sure that you bookmark that site and you refer to it regularly. But to kind of organize it and to pare it down to its simplest terms, there is an organization, the Niche Meat Processing Alliance Network, or as you see on my screen here, NMPAN. They are a fantastic website and highly recommend, if you have not already, please visit this website, dive into it, because there's so much information out there that you will want to access. Also, another resource is VDAX. The Office of Meat and Poultry Services has a site, pages specifically devoted to the regulations around the meat processing and inspection services also. So when you receive these, this information following the webinars, you'll get a copy of this, and all of these links that you see here, you will be able to access. So don't feel like you have to try to copy down the www.vdacs. Not to worry, we're going to send you the links to these resources, but just know that they are out there and they are going to be critical for you if you decide to move forward in pursuing such an endeavor. Of course, there are many regulations. As I mentioned, it can be overwhelming. The types of inspection that you're looking for and the species that you're slaughtering and processing will determine which of the regulations that are out there actually apply. So again, when you go out to the Food Safety Inspection Service website, division of USDA, there is an entire section on just inspection. And then on VDAC's website, they have a PDF and inspection guide. And I just want to check and see if there's, oh, sorry, I was checking.
We're also in the process of re-uploading a, it has to be assessed because they changed the hyperlinks and stuff from FSIS. But we're in the process of making an updated, like, what you general information for applying for a grant of inspection. It should be up, our webmaster should have it up soon. So I don't think it's there. Like if you go to the website right now, it's not there, but it should be there within the month. So
Great, good to know, Peyton. Thank you for sharing that. And once that is live, maybe we can get that information out there, but definitely feel free as you're doing all of your research and your due diligence, keep checking the VDAX website to see if that's been updated. Thank you, Peyton. Let's see. Someone last week asked about the kosher and halal slaughter. So I didn't find a lot of information out there. There was something on the USDA website, but I don't know if that was specifically what you're looking for, but I did find this YouTube video. So the Niche Market, the Niche Meat Processing Alliance Network did do a fairly recent webinar interviewing this expert, and that video is out there on YouTube. And it talks about what exactly kosher halal slaughter is, what's involved in that, and how it can be done under USDA inspection. So I think for anyone who is interested in looking into that, that should prove to be very helpful. I believe it was about an hour-long interview, so should be pretty inclusive of getting you started at the very least. Some of the considerations around regulations for all meat products, things that the USDA concerns themselves with when they are putting together the regulations is the humane handling of livestock. That's kind of foremost. They want to make sure that the animals are being treated in a way that is humane and not cruel. They want, of course, to make sure that the products are fit for human consumption. That's top of the list. There are certain protocols that have to be followed, SSOP and HACCP. These are protocols that you will need to be more than just a little familiar with. We'll dig into those a little bit more in just a minute. Also know that the equipment, the tools, the facilities, and all of a facility's records are up to be inspected, okay? So that may not be what you first think of as far as records, that those would be inspected. But if there are any questions that come up anywhere in the food chain about where did this meat come from, you'll need good records. And then, of course, proper disposal, just another health issue, proper disposal of the waste material from the slaughter. So as I mentioned, even before you can actually qualify for inspection, you're going to need to have the HACCP, which is a Hazard Analysis and Critical Control Points Protocol. This is mandatory. This needs to be in place prior to applying for inspection, as does the Sanitation Standard Operating Procedures. A recall plan. You hope you never need to use it, but in case, that needs to be in place right up front. What are you going to do in the event there needs to be a recall? And again, documentation, showing that you have those things in place, but also detailed records of all of the animals coming in, where they're from, what products are resulting from those supplies and so forth. So lots of documentation that is needed. Let's talk a little bit about HACCP, the Hazard Analysis and Critical Control Points. Need to do a hazard analysis of your entire operation. What are some points where it's absolutely critical that certain sanitation and safety protocols are in place? Where could things go wrong, and what do you do in case something goes wrong? And identifying those critical points, establishing limits. There's a lot more details on it. This is just kind of the 7 bullet point, high level bullet points, but you'll want to dig deeper into this to understand exactly what information you need in this documentation. Corrective actions need to be in place, and again, the record keeping is critical. Peyton did inform me that that an individual within the establishment, at least one person who works at your facility, must have an HACCP certification. And Peyton, is that, I want to clarify, is that necessary to get inspected, or is that only necessary if you ever need to make changes to your HACCP?
So I guess let me back up a little bit. So your HACCP plan is, think of it as a living, breathing reflection of your processes that are physically happening. It's just what's physically happening on paper. So in order to, when you first start your establishment, you first write your initial HACCP plan. In order to enact it and sign it into action, the person has to be HACCP certified.
Got it.
Now, additionally, that person is also the only one that would be allowed to make changes to the physical HACCP plan later on. Now, I say the only one allowed. Other people can have input and, discuss an actual fix or alteration you want to make to it. But when it comes down to who the person is that, they're on your HACCP plan, you have a annual HACCP, basically where you review it annually, and that's where you can decide if you make any changes. You can do it more than once a year, but at minimum, it has to be an annual, basically an annual refresh on the whole process. And you can say you don't want to make any changes, and that's fine because your process hasn't changed. But if you maybe have switched around a couple steps, or you've added a step, or you've taken out a step, then that certified person will then make sure that the HACCP plan is reflecting what's happening in the establishment. And then on that review page, they would make a note of what they changed and the date. And so without that person, you can't make any changes to your HACCP plan. It is what it is, and it's set in stone. So that means your physical process can't change at all. And also, it also means that your HACCP plan would not be able to be signed in and active for your establishment without that certified person. You can get this certification online. Since COVID, they've pretty much put them all online. They're generally through universities. Virginia Tech used to do one. I don't know if they still do. The popular ones the last few years have been NC State does one. University of Maine. I don't know why that one was popular, but it's basically you'll come out with the HACCP certification, and they dig so deep into all of those 7 principles that you have there on the screen, and then even more, like, they give you a lot of information. It's pretty overwhelming, but it's pertinent to be able to maintain your proper records, so that way your HACCP plan reflects accurately what's going on in your establishment.
Got it. So it's pretty unreasonable, I would think, to believe that you have a once and done HACCP plan, that
Right.
because your processes will be changing and your procedures.
Well, and when you do that annual review, if you don't have a certified person, then you can't do the annual review of the HACCP plan. So then that's a non-compliance in terms of HACCP record keeping. So you can make it 364 days, I guess, without a certified person. But when you hit that year mark and you haven't gotten a review of your HACCP plan, then we've run into a record keeping issue.
Got it. Good to know. Thank you for clarifying that. It was very helpful. Then there's the sanitation standard operating procedure. Documentation of how each piece of equipment is to be properly cleaned, the tools supplied, instructions for disassembling each piece of equipment should be available, and how to clean those. And every member of the staff that works in the processing facility should have access to it and be trained on how to safely and properly carry out the sanitation procedures for all parts of the operation. Anything that you'd like to add to that, Peyton? That's very high level.
Well, I was going to say, for right now, I think I don't want to go too deep because, you know, there's a lot of acronyms for one and they get confusing. So you have your SSOP, which is food contact surfaces, you know, the knives, your hands. A lot of times your SSOP will include like an employee hygiene section as well that covers, you know, if they can wear any type of jewelry, which is generally prohibited, except for, you know, like a plain wedding band or like a medical, like alert bracelet or something like that. Those are generally allowed, but, you know, the main thing about SSOP is that it covers and envelops everything that the product touches. You know, whether it doesn't matter if it's the first thing in the morning that it touches or right before it's packaged or, but yeah, it's pretty much a detailed list of, not a list, a detailed procedure of what equipment you have, how you're going to clean it, and the frequency in which you're going to clean it.
Got it. Okay, good. So these should
And
be
then those
just-
are also all a record that the inspector would verify when they're there. So you have a pre-operational SSOP, which is before any operations start, before any meat hits the table. They do that. The establishment does that every day. They conduct a pre-op assessment where they have their list of equipment of what's going to be in use that day. They will make sure that it's up to their standards, and then we will do a pre-operational review where we go through and check everything and make sure that, you know, it is what it says it is, what they, you know, have indicated. And then that also happens again during operation. They have an operational check where, you know, at that point, tables might not be clean. You know, they've got residue if you've been cutting all day, but it's also not contaminated at the same time. You know, it's in use. It's actively being used. So it's not pre-op clean, but it's not contaminated either. And, you know, the employees are washing their hands regularly. They're, you know, if they have an apron, like if they're on the slaughter floor that they have to spray off, that they're spraying their aprons off frequently. You know, some people they go to the extent of having a dropped knife SSOP procedure, where if you drop a knife, you have to go through these things before you can come back to the table. You know, you can get as detailed as you want, but you still have to just meet the minimum requirements.
Good to know. Makes perfect sense. Thank you. Again, a recall plan should be in place, and on the FSIS USDA website, they do have some information on this. There are 3 different classes of recalls, and you need a documentation of a procedure for each one. You should have people within your organization assigned to head up any recall, what exactly is who is going to do what in that process and when, and make sure that the plan includes contact information with the USDA, document these procedures, and include a communication plan, who needs to be notified, and so forth. Anything that I'm missing there, Peyton?
Not that I could recall plans are something that fortunately, I have not had to actually use in terms of you know, having a recall and having to use the actual recall plan, but I do verify them that they are there and that they meet all of the requirements. It's fairly basic, you know, most recall plans they're not very different from each other. It just kind of, you know, especially like on number 6, where it says include a communication plan. That's probably where they differ the most, because depending on where you are closer or farther to different, you know, public services. If it's, you know, whoever you need to notify or whatever, something like that may be the difference. But other than that, most of it's fairly the same. So,
Okay, great, good, thank you. Documentation, thorough, accurate records are vital from what I understand. Peyton, how concerned are the inspectors when they come to a facility as far as the record keeping and documentation at a facility?
so records are very, 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 very important. In the eyes of PS and FSIS, basically, if you did not record what you did, then it did not happen. So if you did your pre-op check, but you didn't sign the paper, then to us, that looks like you didn't do the pre-op. Now, records, you know, each HACCP plan that you have will have its own set of records.
Okay.
They don't generally cross plans. Sometimes you can, but you know, with I'm assuming most people are going to have a slaughter plan and then a raw plan. So your slaughter records are very, very important. It keeps track of how old your animals are. If you have you know, plus or minus 30 months cattle, then if they're under 30 months, then you can take T-bones and porterhouses. If they're over 30 months, then you have to put them into strips and fillets. And if there's any confusion about that, you can check back to your HACCP records and say, okay, well, here it's a plus, so strips and fillets. Those records are taken daily. Like I said, the pre-op records are taken daily, the SSOP records are taken daily, as well as the HACCP records are taken daily. And then the HACCP monitoring that you perform, whether that's taking a temperature or just an observation, then that is notated and initialed and dated and timed when it is performed. So like it's down to the minute, pretty much when you perform it, you write the time. And then on top of that, to make sure that it's basically your own set of checks and balances, is generally people do it once a month. Sometime during the month, you have to do a review and observation. So say, for example, somebody is taking a temperature of ground beef. They take the temperature, they notate it as 42. The other person comes in, and while they are physically taking the temperature, they will observe what the thermometer says and that the person is recording it on the record. And then they will sign on the review and observation. One, they'll put the time that they did it, which should be the same time as the other person. And then they will put what they observed in terms, it has to be a quantifiable result. That's the big thing about HACCP, is that it has to be a quantifiable result. It can't just be yes or no. It has to be 0 or 100 or something that you can measure. So the records are definitely important. You know, some people have more records than what they need. You know, you can go above and beyond, but it all, in my opinion, I think it helps you kind of protect yourself. If there's any question, you know, you can refer back to your record and say, nope, on this day I did this, this, and this, and so it wasn't my fault. And then they can kind of go on to the next thing. But yes, the documentation is very, 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 very important. I know it seems silly to be so up about, you know, like I've written a non-compliance before on a record review time not matching. So like the person recorded the time at say 12:30, but the review and observation time said 12:35, which they don't match. So that's a non-compliance.
That makes sense. Good. Okay, thank you. that kind of sums up everything that I was going to cover on regulations. Just want to remind you that next week, the same time, on the 27th, we will be just having our third and final session, which will be talking about funding, what funds are available, and we'll have another expert here from VDAX to help us with that. But now I'd like to open it up to anyone. If you have any questions, please feel free to put something in the chat box or raise your hand or unmute yourself, whatever works for you.
I don't have any in the chat box right now, Penny,
Okay.
and people are, if they're like me, they have to find their mute button. But
Exactly.
on that, I did want to mention one of the slides you had was, and it was the slide about the recall plan.
Yes.
And I think Peyton had lended some information to it, maybe number 7 or something, was talking about communication plan. When I see that, I think of it as a crisis communication plan. Is that what you were thinking, or in the same sense that I was, or is there something different?
The recall plan, is that what you were thinking of?
Yeah, number 6, include a communication plan.
Got it.
So I think of a crisis communication plan, and
Mhm.
I don't know if you were thinking something different when you said that, or Peyton, if there's something different, like, oh, I have to communicate to certain people. And I think the last thing I'll say that is in regards to that is that the SBDCs and other agencies do have templates and information available for crisis communication plans for all types of businesses. And so if you're looking at saying, I need to make sure that I know who talks to the media, who talks to the different agencies,
Right.
how do we get that information out? Because there will be media behind it, then we have some, kind of templates, I would say, that could be used for that. So I'll just throw that.
That's
in,
good to
that
know.
aspect of it.
Good to know. And I think from my viewpoint, that's kind of what I was thinking of, that this is a crisis communication. There's an imminent health threat or something where products that have come from your facility need to be recalled. Who needs to know? How quickly can they, can you let them know who's going to be in charge of what? Am I off on that, Peyton, or is that kind of what you understood?
Yeah, mainly the communication is one. It kind of also involves number 4, because we have a chain of command that we have to inform, and when something like that happens, so like it goes directly to the supervisor, and then inspection manager and program manager, and then up farther than that. So yeah, I mean, I would definitely, you could consider that a crisis communication plan if you would like as well. But it's mainly communication, one, between you and, I say you, but you being the establishment and, excuse me, and the inspection team.
Got it. Good, that makes sense. Is there anything else, Mandy, that?
Not for me. We do have some questions that have come up. If I don't know if you'd like me to read those, I'll start with the first one.
Yes, please.
Is there any issue with having an owner of the company being the, y'all said HACCP certified person? And how do you all say that shortly, Peyton?
HACCP.
HACCP. So is there any issue with having an owner of the company being the HACCP certified person?
No, there's not. It can be the owner if you want. Now, the only thing is, I understand if it's a small place, then the owner's there every day. If you get to the point where the owner is not there on a daily basis, they may not be the best person to have as the certified person, because if they're not super involved in the process, then it's going to be hard for them to make changes to something that they're not super comfortable with. So if they don't, not saying that they can't be, but they can be if you want. I would have it be somebody that is involved in the process on a daily basis, and I would say that's the main point, because that's the only way you get more comfortable with what is required with HACCP is just the daily completion and doing of it.
That makes complete sense. Good. And was there another one?
Yes, is the HACCP required for custom exempt?
So the HACCP plans are not required for custom exempt establishments. They custom exempt still, they do have to do the SSOP records. Now there's not, with custom exempt plants, there's not an inspector there on the daily like there is with inspected plants. So, you know, it's not like somebody's going to be checking your records daily, but they are visited frequent, you know, on a regular basis. So it's good to keep your records current, and be able to present those records if they're asked for. You should keep the records for a year minimum, a little longer if you're doing, which I don't know how many people are interested in doing, like smoked or you know, like ready to eat products. But with ready to eat products, you need to keep the records for longer than with raw products. One thing too that I wanted to point out, I guess it was at the very beginning where you said that it's where VDAX does inspections on behalf of FSIS.
Yes.
So that is true. That's not true.
Okay.
So Virginia, there's not every state has a state meat inspection program. Virginia does. And so we have adapted the Virginia regulations directly from the federal. So basically the difference is you can have two types of inspection in Virginia. You can have state inspection, or you can have, well, it's called Talmadge-Aiken, but we call it TA.
Right.
Which they are a federal plant, but that is under a state meat inspection program. So a state inspected program, the meat can only be sold and moved within the state. So if you go to a Virginia state plant, it can't go to West Virginia and North Carolina.
Right.
If you go to a TA plant, they function like a federal plant, so they can cross state lines. You can export them if you really want to. And but all of the requirements in terms of sanitation, records, facilities, all of that is the exact same. There's no difference in the requirements. It's just a little difference in what you can do with the product after.
So VDEX does, however, carry out the federal inspections. Should a facility say, I want to be able to transport out of the state, it is still VDEX that performs that inspection on behalf of the USDA because of the Talmadge-Aiken, or how does that work?
With the TA plants, basically at the end of your HACCP, I don't want to say task, but at the last step of your HACCP physical plan is a pre-shipment review. And your pre-shipment review, basically, all the product is sealed, labeled, as if the customer could come in and buy it right now. When they sign off on that pre-shipment review, that's the establishment saying they followed all of their procedures, all of their, if they had to make any, what I'm looking for, I'm blanking on the word. But basically, anything throughout the entire process that was notable was then reviewed during that pre-shipment review, and then it's signed off on. So basically, that product is completed, all the steps, and is now officially inspected and passed, and can be sent out into commerce. While it's in Virginia, it is subject, then at that point, once it leaves the pre-shipment review and say the customer has it now. If they want to move that inspected product within the state, then they need a meat and poultry handler's permit. Which if you've got a grant of inspection, then a meat and poultry handler's permit is cake to get compared to that. So that basically just covers the movement of the inspected product within the state. Now, once it leaves Virginia, and it's allowed to leave Virginia, like it's from a TA or federal plant, then it becomes the state it enters jurisdiction. So like if it goes from here to North Carolina, I have jurisdiction until the North Carolina line. And then once it hits North Carolina, then whatever their regulations are take place. And they take it from there.
Okay.
All right.
So I guess a facility would reach out to you, Peyton, or someone at VDAX and say, this is what I'm looking to do. And then you would help guide them through the process of what they need to know, I guess, essentially, right?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, good. Mandy, are there any other questions on there?
Yeah, we've had a few more come in. Sorry, I've got
Great.
the screen. So the next one is can someone please talk about zoning requirements and procedure for a slaughterhouse? I know some counties are more sensitive allowing slaughterhouses to operate. It would be nice to explain the steps in acquiring license from various departments. Now, Peyton, I don't know if you can lend any information to this, but I have asked Nicole Hare, who is with Mount Rogers Regional Partnership, to see if she would actually take this question. She's joined us today, and she has an extensive background in zoning. So unless Penny or Peyton have any information, I'll ask Nicole to go ahead and maybe lend a little bit of insight.
I was gonna say, I don't handle any of the zoning. That's all before me. So I unfortunately am not the one to answer that one.
Right.
Looking to you, Nicole.
Absolutely. And I don't mind at all. So each community is going to be different. Each county is going to be different. Some counties have zoning, some do not. So your best option is to start with your county level administration, usually a planning zoning department there. They'll be able to guide you through that process. What we normally see in zoning is it's going to be a property that is zoned for like industrial or manufacturing because of the intensiveness of the operation. If it has a smell, odor could be offensive. Another thing to think about in the communities that you're looking at operating, and depending on the scale of your operation, you're also going to need to talk to them about infrastructure. If you are utilizing their water and sewer system, and whether or not their capacity can handle and treat any waste within your operation. So I always recommend, from my standpoint, is working directly with your county administration, because you want to get some buy-in from them too, but then they'll be able to help guide you and direct you to who you're going to be speaking with, especially if you're having to do any public hearings regarding your project. If they're requiring any kind of permitting that's going to require a public hearing process, you're going to want to have those conversations early on when you're looking at properties and looking at operation. So that first step is always going to be, you have a property in mind, you want to know that zoning on that property and whether or not it would allow for that use, and then the next steps with the county.
Thanks, Nicole. And if I remember right, a lot of times it is, I think you may have mentioned this, I'm doing a couple things at once, but it is usually in that manufacturing. And so zoning can be different levels of light, heavy. Yep. And so again, that's why having that conversation with the locality is just so important up front.
And some counties will allow it by right, and some counties will not. When it's by right, don't expect that you can just go in and do it. Again, having those conversations regarding the capacity for their infrastructure. If you're going to be using public water and sewer, you're going to need to know their capacity and if they can handle the operation as well.
Okay. Thank you, Nicole. So, all right. Another question, I think this may be directed towards Peyton specifically. Are you considering mobile units as custom exempt? If not, then how does the inspection regulations apply to them?
So mobile units as just a baseline, or they can be inspected or custom. If you are using a mobile slaughter unit to resale product, like if you're wanting to slaughter animals and then wholesale the product, then they do need to be inspected. The regulations apply the exact same. They don't change. The mobile unit has to meet the same requirements as a traditional brick and mortar unit. They don't really have any exceptions for them. It's just kind of scaled way, 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 way down. So instead of, a huge kill floor that has, multiple different stations, it kind of all happens in one spot. And so your sanitation is definitely, its importance is heightened, I would say, because you're in such a small space that whatever space you touch kind of has to be clean. So if you want to have a mobile slaughter unit or a mobile processing unit, you can do that as custom, but the same sanitation regulations still apply. And even if it's a mobile unit, you still can't resell custom exempt product. It still has to be marked not for sale and go to someone's home after that.
Mhm. Oh, thank you.
And I think that may lead into this next question. And Adam, if I'm misstating it, please feel free to unmute to ask this. But the question was, if you're custom exempt and you want to sell the goods, if you want to sell using inspected meats, what are the requirements? So I guess, Adam, you're currently custom exempt and maybe you want to move into selling inspected meats. And
Let's say, so for custom, if you are a custom exempt shop, everything that you produce will be not for sale, regardless if it comes in from an inspected source or if you slaughter it, in your own facility there in your custom exempt establishment, then you can't sell it. Sorry, it'll all have not for sale on it, and technically you're not even selling the meat at that point. You're actually selling the animal, and you're selling the animal prior to it being slaughtered. So in a custom shop, you're not technically selling the meat. You're selling shares of an animal that will then be slaughtered and brought home to you. Now, if you are wanting to go from custom to expected, then you can use inspected product that you didn't make. You can order it in. There are a few steps that go along with that. So one, you need to have a step in your HACCP plan that addresses receiving raw meat. You would need letters of guarantee from that supplier saying that it's been tested for E. coli or something that will justify your decision making, saying that it's not going to be one of your CCPs of your HACCP plan, your critical control point. So with that, the best bet, if you are wanting to sell from a custom shop, then you either need to apply for a grant of inspection and ultimately become an inspected establishment, and you can't be these at the same time, or you can become a retail shop, which a retail shop is completely different from a custom shop, but they have retail is sold directly to the consumer. There's no middleman in between. So it's just kind of something to consider, but to answer the question as it's written, you can't do that. So there are no regulations because it's against the regulation to sell custom exempt product.
Okay. Hopefully that answered Adam's question. Is that what I was thinking?
Hopefully that answers it. I think I'm getting the gist, like if you're if you order basically inspected meat and you're at a custom shop, can you cut it up and sell it? No.
So,
All right. And I think all, Penny, if I'm right, you include our contact information. So while, you know, I can't answer that question that Adam provided. That's not a role necessarily in a small business development center because it's very specific to the industry. There are going to be, you know, contact information for these different agencies and individuals that may be able to direct you in that correct location. So if you don't get your answer today or you want to dig deeper into it, be sure to take a look at the information that we are sharing. Okay. I don't have any other questions in the chat box. Of course, we do want to provide the opportunity if anybody wants to unmute and ask anything.
sure. I have put up on the screen the contact information for the SBDC offices, Cindy Fields and Mandy Archer, and Peyton's information is up there. Her phone, email, and of course the website for VDEX is there. My contact information is up there really is peripheral because I only know what I have found online. So I am not the expert by any means. I'm simply a conduit of information, able to point you in the right direction, hopefully. But we appreciate everyone being on. If there aren't any other questions, we'll just remind you that next week at the same time at noon, we will be talking about funding. And we'll have Stephen Verson from VDEX on that call and that webinar to talk about what you need to know from a high level standpoint about funding, what funds you will need, and where possibly to get them, where they need to come from. So that's all I have. Do you have anything else, Mandy?
Yeah, well, just one question. If maybe the person who is AY could stay on and just let us know who you are, we would appreciate that for our role taking. And then also just thank you to everyone for joining us. Peyton, thank you for taking the time out of your day to lend your expertise and be a resource to our clients. And again,
I'm down in Southwest, down in Grayson County today, so I'm
hey,
down in it. Yeah.
you're right next door to me. So
Yep.
wonderful. So yeah, we just want to thank everybody for joining us again. We will be sending out, or I don't know if that's going to come from one of our offices, a webinar wrap up or a copy of the webinar as well as this presentation. And then I think Penny, a guide that we have worked with you or you have put together for us for meat processing facilities. We typically include that as well. It's just an overview guide of all of this kind of compilated into one. And then we'll just share that. If for some reason you don't get that, feel free to reach out to us to make sure that you have the information you want. Other than that, I don't have anything. Thank you so much to everybody for joining us today. We hope this has been a informative overview of the regulatory side of meat processing, and we look forward to talking with or having Steve Verson. I think Steve's with us next week to talk about financing options associated with meat processing. So again, thank you for being with us, and we'll be talking to you next week. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Pull the data.